So the problem with dementia is that people give up and they assume that it's just a matter of like maintaining their status and keeping them medically fit.
One of the biggest challenges is that we tend to focus on operational standards to help determine quality of life, when in fact we should be asking ourselves what brings quality of life to residents.
And we realized for this population of people who are living with moderate to more advanced levels of dementia that the quality of life for this population was almost exclusively dependent on the quality of care provided by the care environment.
Really at the moment, dementia is seen as this kind of final stage of life, this kind of complete loss of identity and memory. And there's a sense that it's this tragic thing that's happened and that people lose, in some ways, their personhood and their rights. And they lose their credit cards, their ID, they lose their freedom in many cases. And they're just left waiting for the next meal and relying on other people. So there's all this love that's devoted to them and showered on them, but there's no purpose and there are no tasks. And I think this is very bad for a human brain. If it doesn't have a context to work within, it tends to use it or lose it. It loses it. And so society, I think, has to find a better role and meaning for people with dementia and give them a purpose.
People living with cognitive impairments will lose to some degree their declarative or explicit memory, but will retain our implicit memory. So how can we utilize this remaining ability to get them to engage in some type of activity that would be familiar to them, such as petting a cat or turning a wheel? And how can we use that to be a switch so it could supply to them some sort of memory trigger, such as a song or some sort of media content that would access a memory and help with the agitated behavior.
What we learn earliest in life often stays with us to the later stages of dementia, and that's one of the premises of Montessori or dementiability, is that you look for these abilities and try to engage residents at these different levels of ability throughout their life, right to the end stage.
We're involved in a study with the University of Toronto. We have these interventions deployed in 6 long-term care facilities across Southern Ontario. What's unique about our approach is we can personalize the content to the individual. So if I am, for example, an 83-year-old Russian person, and I've lost my ability to speak English, we can provide the individual a beacon which identifies me. We can load content specific to me so that when I interact with any of these switches, it gives me something meaningful to me.
So in the Ambient Activities Technologies project, the research really is focused on looking at whether there's an impact of this technology on various outcomes in the residents. By using this technology, do we see a reduction in agitation? Do we see a reduction in aggression? Are people feeling sort of happier, more content by using this technology?
The residents are using the AAT machine quite regularly, and you can see a lot of them will come and they will utilize the machine on a regular basis. We can't be there all the time, so it's nice to have something that the residents can go to without needing a lot of direction from staff that they can utilize on their own.
Residents who would maybe have a responsive behavior of yelling, waiting for their daughter to call, or supper, or to go to bed. It's kind of a distraction and engages them in something that they're interested in, or something that I never thought they were interested in, or maybe they didn't think they were interested in as well. It's been excellent in our environment.
Previous to the installation of the unit, my mom was often very agitated. So one time I came in and she was just beyond herself. She was almost vibrating in her wheelchair that she was so upset, and she had her glasses off, she wouldn't wear them, she was just upset and angry. So I sort of removed her from that situation to a quiet area. We were sort of going for a walk around, pushing her wheelchair, and I saw the unit and I said, oh, And as soon as we wheeled up to it, she was reaching out for the cat and petting the cat. And then we watched all the pictures of the cats, and you could see it's almost a visible calmness that was beginning to take effect.
Yeah, you try it.
I don't know how to do it.
Turn the knob.
Which way?
I think the reason that people are apathetic and not doing anything is because they have nothing to do. I think if we give them stimulating activities, then we're going to see them suddenly light up and find an interest in life. So it's a matter of making sure that the activities are meaningful to them, and then I think we're going to see a lot of engagement, just simply because the apathy comes from having nothing to do.
When he first started reaching, he couldn't reach the knobs with this arm. Now he can. So already you're improving.
But perhaps the most important problem with what goes in dementia is control. So the person loses the ability to control their behavior and to deal with things like frustration. And that is particularly important because now they are no longer functioning in a way that's acceptable to the people around them. But we can't give up. Brain function is diminished, and there are severe problems, but we need to build on what remains. A person with dementia is still a functioning human being, still has a lot of the mechanisms of enjoyment, and still has a way to learn, but it's a different way than the one we think of normally.
We have to consider all the needs of the residents. We have to consider their social needs, their intellectual needs, physical needs, spiritual needs, and emotional needs. And so we try to develop programs that address all these different domains of health. When we do that, then we create those moments of meaning and purpose, because every individual is unique. They all have different levels of ability and different interests, and so you have to take all that into consideration, and then you have to try to create a program or an activity for a person that meets all those requirements.
We were interested in looking at the impact of ABBY on residents with dementia, their family members, as well as long-term care staff. And so what we see is a significant reduction in agitation. So we see lower physically non-aggressive agitated behaviors from pre-test to post-test. We see lower verbally non-aggressive behaviors, as well as reductions in verbally aggressive behaviors. We see lower paranoia and delusions. We see fewer activity disturbances, as well as lowered aggressiveness. And we also see a reduction in anxieties and phobias from pre-test compared to post-test. And interestingly, we also see a significant improvement in quality of life following ABBY usage.
If you give a person antipsychotics, you can dampen down these responsive behaviors, and then you don't have to deal with them. But at the same time, you're reducing the quality of life of the person, you're increasing the possibility of strokes, and other health effects such as falls may result. So one solution is to use ambient activities or technologies that are available in the environment all the time.
Rather than be reactive to behaviors, waiting for the behavior to escalate before we engage them with an activity or with ABBY, we would recognize when these behaviors are triggered at certain times of day, and maybe be proactive enough to take that resident and use ABBY prior to the behavior showing up. Because we do know through research that if a person is appropriately engaged in an activity, they cannot at the same time show a responsive behavior.
For certain kinds of problem, such as boredom under stimulation and frustration, they can interact with the technology and overcome the problems that would otherwise result in aggressive and responsive behaviors.
So we see that we have evidence-based support that ABBY is being effectively designed to promote independent engagement in meaningful activities for people with dementia. We see that it reduces responsive behaviors such as wandering and screaming, and it also helps to alleviate staff burnout, which is often reported in long-term care homes.
We hope to be able to develop a line of interventions that simply augment the care environment. We hope that we can deploy these in all long-term care homes and be part of that holistic approach that helps the care environments overall.